This video is brought to you by Adorama.com.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Maximum brightness.
Hello and welcome. You find yourself checking out the Athlon Optics 1-4x24 Talos BTR series rifle scope. If you hear rain in the background, that's because it is pouring outside and I have my windows open to get some fresh air in here. Now, this is the first time I've done the laundry room clearing in quite some time, and to be honest, it was actually very exciting to get back down and into it. And with this Talos, it's actually been pretty damn good. I gotta say this because I'm gonna mention it a couple times in this video. This has one of the closest 1Xs I've ever gotten behind, and it's so peculiar to say that with a $170 optic.
Pew pew, pew pew.
I also haven't pew-pewed in a long time, so I figured that I'd make sure I got plenty of those in for this video. I also have to thank all of you for voting on this scope to be sent in from Adorama.com. This is the third and final scope from that shipment. The other two were the Leopold and the Vortex. This Athlon's going to be rounding out the third and last.
Pew pew.
The last of this shipment, that is. But enough of that. Let's talk about the scope. So I already talked about how the 1X on this is very, very true to 1X, and you're going to see more examples of that soon. The illumination, however, is actually very good, all things considered. Yes, we're in a dark room, but my flashlight's about 400 or 500 lumens, and it does a very good job of keeping up with the brightness.
Pew pew. Pew 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 pew.
In fact, the only time the illumination is going to be less than spectacular is in an environment like this. Basically the middle of the day, bright sunny day out, you get the picture. However, the illumination does work well, so I'm going to say it is a win for the illumination. We're now zooming into 4x, or maximum magnification, on this optic at a 30-yard power transformer, and just take a look at how good it looks. There's very little blurring, very little distortion, and it's actually surprisingly in focus. That's because having an LPVO of such a low magnification, you don't really have parallax issues like you would on a higher magnification scope like on the VX Freedom and Crossfire 2 that I just reviewed that were both 4-12s. 4x on those isn't terrible, but once you go above that, it starts to deteriorate inside of 100 yards. Here, we focus our attention to an 80-inch tall steel door at about 400 yards. And again, the performance at the center is surprisingly good. But now that we're a little bit farther out into the distance, you'll see that the edge does get a little bit on the blurry side, but it keeps a lot of the detail at the center sharp, bright, and usable. Yeah, there might be a little bit of contrasting issues, but nothing that I would be overly concerned about, especially for an optic this inexpensive. You're talking about $170. The reticle, I actually like how it looks. It's finite enough to get a good position on your target, but those crosshairs are thick enough to really catch your eye. And when you're in an environment like this, those big crosshairs are great because it attracts your eye to the center. So here the illumination is on maximum, which is at 11, and when we go side to side and left to right, well, side to side and up and down, you're going to see that the illumination is still on in the dead zone. So what that means is that if you're not behind the scope 100%, you have both eyes open, you're trying to get on target, you'll still be able to see the reticle. It should superimpose into your other eye. Now, what we did just now, going back and forth, very little distortion. Fisheyeing on this is great. And at 4x, again, you have a very bright, beautiful image. Now, here's a good example of how good the 1X is on this. Panning across the trees, the closest tree here is probably 10 feet. And you'll see that the tree trunk is lined up to where it should be roughly outside of the scope body. A lot of optics, especially higher end optics, don't even perform that well. Here's another great example of that. When we go to slice the pie around this corner, wall matches, we're looking through the optic and on the outside of the optic. It's a really good performance, one that completely blew my mind when I got behind this optic. It actually was so bizarre to me because when I looked through it, I almost thought there was something wrong with the scope. But it's just that good. The only thing that kills it for me actually is just how much of the scope body you can still see. We now find ourselves at the 50-yard line at my local range down at Small Bore, and again you'll see it does a pretty decent job when we pan across. The backstop does have a shift to it, but I find that most LPVOs do. I really don't know why that is, because despite this thing having a really good ability to have most things be not super magnified at 1x, it still has some sort of shift. Zooming into 4x to watch my friend shoot his 22 at these steel targets, you'll see the image quality is still very good. Keep in mind that it was very overcast this day, and in fact it was raining, and that does play around with how the scope looks. A lot of the colors get muted, etc, etc. We're now looking through the scope on my 1022, and you'll see that it works perfectly fine. Very easy to use and get behind. I dare even say that an LPVO like this on a 1022 or a match made in heaven. Now, it's also very easy to get behind this because the I-box on this is very good at 1x and still continues to be good at 4x, like you're about to see here. 1x, we already got a taste of it, but getting behind it at 1x at any sort of distance is very, very friendly. I mean that as in, it's inviting you to get behind it, there's no real issues, and again, very little distortion coming out of the glass as far as fisheyeing or any of that sort of stuff goes. Bumping it up to 2x, and it's still very good to get behind. You'll see the vegetation in the background start to shift when we go side to side. It actually gets clocked depending on how you're going, but the illumination is still active even in the dead zone, and that's going to play a big role if you're shooting both eyes open like you should be anyway. Here at 4x, again, it's a bit of the same performance. It's very good. It's open enough that you don't have to worry about having your cheek weld change, and if you were to get behind this thing at 4x, as long as you had decent muscle memory, you'd have no problems. The I-box performance of the scope is better than most others, and I really wish companies would pay more attention like Athlon does with this one. Now, I'm going to stop talking so this way you can get in the zone with me clearing my friend's backyard. All clear.
Pew 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 pew.
That escalated rather quickly. I'm going to let the video voiceover go over the tracking
This
test
thing
as well.
actually looks surprisingly good down here. This is the Athlon Talos 1 to 4. We're going to just go left, right, and then up and down. So we are at 8.3. Let's go. Good. Wow, there's a lot of adjustment here. And then 1, 2. So we're really close. We're about one click off from perfect 0. Let's go up. We're at 11.1. So you can see that it clearly stays to the right. It's good enough.
Good enough indeed. It tracked surprisingly well. And just so you get an idea, this is what it looks like with the illumination at full in a darkened environment, such as a garage. But other than that, for an LPVO like this, it tracks way better than I was expecting and had a lot more adjustment, as you saw in your windage, than most other scopes that I've reviewed. Now, I actually get a lot of requests from people asking me what kind of light that I use. I use an Olight Mini Valkyrie, and I'm going to do a review on it one day, I promise. It's just finding the time to actually do that. Continuing to look through this Talos at 1x is just so impressive to me. It really is. The thing that this lets this scope down so much is just how much of the body you still see. And you can get it a little bit better at 1x, but then you have a hard time getting it at 4x. Illumination is now set at maximum, and you can see in an environment like this, it is more than sufficient. Even in the daytime, you can see a little bit of color change, but it's not enough to warrant it as full daytime bright. But for everything else, it is perfect.
Pew pew.
If you need more than that, you got to spend more money to get better illumination. It's as simple as that. Now, if the center of this crosshair was the only thing illuminated, similar to the Nightforce SVH that I reviewed from Sparks, I really like the illumination on that, but again, on that scope, the illumination wasn't bright enough. I would love to have seen just the center of the crosshair on this illuminated and have it be really, really bright, and for the price, it would have been a knockout. It would have been fantastic. To get exceptional daytime bright, you got to spend around $500, $600 and get a PST Gen 2. The Burris RT6 is, it's not on par with that, but it's also twice the price of this scope. That's something to take into consideration as well.
Pew pew.
Again, this is $170. And when you compare it to the Crossfire 2 1-4 that I reviewed a while ago, which is about a $200 scope, the illumination on this far exceeds that. Glass performance on this I also think exceeds the Crossfire 2 because it just looks better, and the 1x performance on this cannot be beat for the price. Absolutely bar none.
Pew pew. Pew pew.
Basically what I'm trying to say is that this scope is very, very good for the money. But you know what? Enough of this. Let's get into my final thoughts.
What is left to say about this little optic? Honestly, I can't think of anything. It works front to back, side to side. Everything about it is good. It's adequate. Glass is surprisingly good. Turrets track and work well. The illumination is good. It's daytime usable. I'm not going to say it's full daytime bright because when it's daytime bright, I want it to be blinding. It's not that light. It's not that bright, but it's great for anything past twilight, which is completely usable. Same thing goes for if you're indoors. It's always a nice little feature to have. Illumination ring is tight. I was battling that a little bit in this video, but it is, basically brand new. I've only moved it back and forth maybe about 20, 25 times. So that'll eventually break in, I'm sure. Illumination not being up here, absolutely no problems whatsoever. Didn't have any issues with it. It always worked, which is always nice. Turrets, again, I'm not the biggest fan of target turrets on an LPVO like this, but this one has it. That's basically it. This is one of the reasons why I probably wouldn't purchase this, is only because of that. Again, it's something that I believe in and don't really care for. But other than that, quite impressed by it. Glass, like I said, was very good. Eyebox is very forgiving. And, well, that's basically about it. This would be great if you're into airsoft and you don't want to spend a fortune on an LPVO, but you still want something that's of some sort of quality that you can put on a 22 or probably even a 223 without much issue. I don't know how this will handle really high recoil, but Athlon apparently has an extremely good warranty, so that's why you buy a name brand like this, because if something does happen, which more than likely something will eventually happen, you send it in, you get it replaced, and you're good to go. Weight-wise, it is a little on the heavy side, but it's not something that I would be overly concerned about, to be brutally honest, especially if you're going to be putting on a small lightweight rifle. For comparison's sake, this is a Trijicon 1-4 AccuPower, and it's only about 2 ounces lighter, so it is a good size for a 1-4, which I really like. I don't like it when scopes are unnecessarily large, even though the PST or the Razer HD 1-6s for that matter are rather large looking scopes, but they just work so well that you can get past it. Do I recommend this? Absolutely. No questions about it, especially for the price, around $170 from Adorama.com. Put this on a airsoft gun, put this on a 22, put this on your 223, just use it, abuse it, do whatever you want with it. It's a great little option for that. Would I personally buy it? If it had capped turrets I'd never have to worry about, sure, this would be a very considerable optic. But again, it's just not perfect for me. However, if it's good for you, it's got a recommendation from me. A huge thank you to all of you for voting on this scope to get sent in for review from Adorama.com. And a huge thank you to Adorama.com for sending this in for review. It is excellent to be working with you. You're a great company to deal with, and I look forward to continuing in the future. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching. See you again next time.
And a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you, this wouldn't be possible.